There's this story Grateful Dead fans tell about early 1970. Owsley Stanley, Bear, the guy who made the best acid in the world and built the Dead sound systems, supposedly walked into a room and told the band if they didn't get their shit together, he was done. And without Bear, there wasn't really a band. Now, nobody wrote that down. There's no interview where Bear says, "Yeah, I threatened to quit." But everyone who was around then agrees something like that happened. The frustration was real. The crisis was real. And what came after suggests somebody said something that made the Dead realize they were about to lose everything. Here's what we know for sure. By early 70, the Grateful Dead were completely falling apart. What came out of that collapse would be Workingman's Dead and American Beauty. But they were nowhere near that yet. May 69, Garcia's on stage, stops playing mid-song. He's screaming at Bear because he can't hear anything through the monitors. Michael Lydon was there, documented the whole thing. Garcia wouldn't keep going, said he wouldn't fake it. Pigpen's standing there saying, "Yeah, I can fake it just fine." That's the state of things. This is where things stood heading into 1970. This was still the post-Ken Kesey acid tests world, where structure felt like the enemy. Half the band ready to mail it in, the other half furious about it. A year later, June 5th, 70, Fillmore West, between songs, Bobby Weir starts chanting at Bear to "get it together." Then Pigpen threatens there won't be another fucking word from this stage until the monitors work. This is documented on the actual tape. Bear got abuse from the band constantly in 70. Rolling Stone caught some of this tension. Jerry called Bear Satan in our midst and a prince of inefficiency. You don't say that about somebody unless they've been making you crazy for a long time. But they needed him, hated needing him, but they did. John Perry Barlow remembered it this way. Bear made it clear there was only one way to do everything, his way. If you wanted to be an idiot and do something anyway but his, that was your decision, and he was not surprised you would choose to be an idiot. Phil Lesh said Garcia once told him, "There's nothing wrong with Bear that a few billion less brain cells wouldn't cure." That's the documented stuff, the on-stage blow-ups, the insults, the tension. What we can't prove is whether Bear sat them down and delivered some kind of formal ultimatum. But given how bad things were getting, it makes sense something had to give. The Aoxomoxoa sessions had eaten all their money. Garcia admitted later those songs were cumbersome. Garcia speak for, "We really screwed up." They'd blown Woodstock so badly their manager, John McIntyre, said he was embarrassed. Garcia's response? "It's nice to know you can blow the most important gig in your career and it doesn't really matter." Either enlightened or completely delusional. Road crew perpetually dosed, playing getting sloppy, and the business side was a nightmare nobody wanted to acknowledge. Mickey Hart's father, Lenny, had taken over as manager in April 69. Lenny was this evangelical preacher type, looked responsible on paper. The band thought he'd save them. Bob Weir said later the whole thing was a fiasco, and Lenny was too busy pocketing money. Michael Lydon watched it unfold in real time, wrote that Owsley Stanley and Lenny Hart were like two selves of the Dead at war. The acid chemist demanding professional operations versus the preacher manager quietly robbing everyone. And the band's calling Bear Satan while an actual thief runs their finances. Bear saw it coming. He'd complained for months that Ron Rockow at the Carousel Ballroom was charging too little and paying too much, and the band had nothing to do with it. Bear understood what the Dead didn't want to hear. You can't just be artists and hope the money works itself out. Roni Stanley, who was there through all of it, said Bear never trusted him. To Bear, the only reason that he was in it was for money. So where was he getting the money? We were broke. We didn't have any money. That's what made Bear suspicious. But nobody listened. Rosie McGee quit working for Lenny because she couldn't stand him. Didn't matter to the band. Roadie Jonathan Reister quit in mid-69. Other roadies threatened to quit, still didn't sink in. So whether Bear formally threatened to leave, or whether it was just the accumulation of his visible frustration and constant criticism, By early 70, the message was clear. This can't continue. Then everything collapsed at once. January 30th, 70, New Orleans. Police raid the hotel at 3 in the morning, arrest 19 people, including Owsley and several crew members. The whole thing was almost predictable. Jefferson Airplane had been busted at the same hotel a few weeks earlier. Jerry got warned at the airport when they landed, was given a lawyer's number just in case. The hotel security told them to keep it clean. And at 2 in the morning, there's people in a room cleaning a pound of weed. Cops came through the door, arrested the Dead, roadies, tour manager, Owsley. Everyone except Pigpen, who didn't use psychedelics, and Tom Constantin, who had literally just quit. Next day, the Dead played a benefit at the warehouse to raise bail. Donations from fans to get out of jail. They raised the bail, got everyone out. Then Bear's bail from his 67 LSD manufacturing case got revoked anyway. Off to prison. The guy who'd been warning them about mismanagement and demanding better was suddenly gone. March 70, Lenny Hart disappears with the money. Band's accountant David Parker tried to see the books. Lenny wouldn't hand over the checkbook or let us look at the books. When they finally forced it, Parker discovered Lenny had cleaned out all the bank accounts, and the band didn't even have any money to go on the road with. Rock Scully confirmed later, Lenny had 11 separate accounts, open shell companies, diverted tax money, somewhere between $70,000 and $155,000 gone, depending on which source you believe. They had to hire private detectives to find him in San Diego. So by spring 70, whether Bear formally threatened to quit or not doesn't really matter. The Dead are exactly where he'd been warning them they'd end up. Sound engineer in prison, manager absconded with everything, can't afford to tour. Mickey Hart's about to leave because how do you stay after your father does that? Whether Bear said the words or not, reality delivered the ultimatum. And that forced them to do what they've been avoiding. Simplify, get disciplined. Write songs people could actually remember. March 6th through 8th, 1970. Fillmore West, booked by Bill Graham, that. Miles had just released Bitches Brew, was reinventing jazz as electric and modal and completely fearless. He brought that band. Jack D. Jonette on drums, Chick Corea on electric piano, just tearing through these long improvisations that made the Dead's jams look quaint. Phil Lesh standing backstage after Miles destroys, thinking, how can we possibly play after this? We should just go home. There's even a poster from those shows. This wild psychedelic thing with an X-rayed hand holding a nautilus shell. First and only time Miles Davis and the Grateful Dead shared a bill. Miles said later the crowd was spacey, high white people. But after he won them over, a lot of young white people showed up at the gigs. Dead felt completely outclassed. Here's Miles Davis showing them what professional musicianship actually looks like. What happens when you demand excellence instead of just getting high and hoping it works out. They could either rise to that level or admit they were amateurs. They worked harder. They'd been doing acoustic sets through winter 69 into 70. Simpler stuff, tighter harmonies. Garcia realized the Aoxomoxoa approach was a dead end. Expensive, time-consuming, too complicated to pull off live when you're exhausted and broke. June 70, Workingman's Dead, recorded and mixed in about 10 days. For a Grateful Dead album, that's insane, but they didn't have time or money for anything else. And something weird happened. The album that came out of complete desperation, financial ruin, and crisis, it was their most accessible work. Country-influenced, concise, vocal harmonies you could actually follow. Uncle John's Band, Casey Jones, Cumberland Blues, songs that felt finished instead of endless, songs you could play on the radio, songs your parents might actually like. The irony is perfect. The Dead's broke, their manager stole everything, their sound guy's in prison, and they respond by making an album that brings in a whole new audience. People who'd never sit through a 30-minute Dark Star could get into Workingman's Dead. It saved them commercially while they were trying to save themselves artistically. American Beauty that fall. Same energy, same discipline. Those two albums didn't just save them financially. They proved the Dead could write actual songs when they had to. Bear got out August 72. By then, the Dead had been functioning without him for over 2 years. They'd hired other sound engineers, other roadies, everything had moved on. Bear wanted back in, but wanted it his way. Authority to hire and fire crew, control over the sound system. Band said no. They'd learned to work without one person having that much power. The road crew didn't want him back either. Too much had changed. The band did play a show at Terminal Island Prison in August 71 while Bear was still locked up. Dosed Owsley, the other prisoners, all the guards. Very Dead thing to do. Visit your imprisoned sound guy and get the whole prison high. Bear eventually designed the Wall of Sound, premiered March 74 at the Cow Palace. 40 feet tall, 604 speakers, 26,400 watts. Phil said playing through it was like piloting a flying saucer. Brilliant system, revolutionary actually. Separate speaker arrays for each instrument, incredible clarity. Also, insanely expensive. Needed 2 complete crews to move it. One setting up the next venue while the other tore down the last one. The Dead ended up taking a 20-month touring break in 74, partly because the Wall of Sound was bankrupting them. Again. Even when Bear was right, he was expensive. Lenny got arrested August 71. Private detectives tracked him to San Diego, where he was baptizing people and calling himself Reverend Lenny B. Hart. Court date March 72. He told the judge there was a lot of money floating around, everyone ripping off each other, and he succumbed to the temptation to take my share. Everyone's ripping off everyone, so why not me? That was his defense. Judge ordered him to pay back $55,000 and do 6 months. The band only recovered part of what he took. Robert Hunter wrote, "He's gone" about Lenny. Steal your face right off your head. After Pigpen died, people thought it was about him. Hunter had to clarify. I warned them about him from the beginning. People thought it was about Pigpen after Pig died, but they didn't think. Mickey left February 71, didn't come back full-time until 74. Can't blame him. So did Bear actually deliver an ultimatum in early 1970? We don't know. Nobody documented it. But the tensions were real. The onstage fights, the insults, the constant criticism about money and professionalism. Bear's frustration with how they were running things was obvious to everyone. And when the crisis hit, New Orleans bust, Lenny's theft, complete financial collapse, the Dead responded exactly like someone had forced them to face reality. They simplified, got disciplined, made Workingman's Dead and American Beauty, survived. Whether Bear threatened to quit or whether the situation itself delivered the message doesn't really change what happened next. The Grateful Dead in early 70 were a band on the edge of destruction. Someone made them realize it, and they pulled back just in time. Deadheads argue about the best versions of songs, greatest shows, peak years. None of those arguments happen if the band doesn't survive 70, and they almost didn't. The story about Bear's ultimatum might be folklore, but the crisis was real, the anger was real, the near collapse was real, and what saved them, that discipline, that simplification, those 2 albums that came directly out of hitting bottom. Owsley Stanley made the best acid in the world. Whether he saved the Grateful Dead by threatening to leave or just by being right about everything while everyone hated him for it, either way, they survived because somebody finally made them listen.